like Pets on Parade,
It
right?
does. It's like,
Good evening. If I could ask those of you who are still chatting, please take a seat. We'll get started in a moment. On behalf of the Peoria Governing Board, I'd like to thank you for being here tonight. The Governing Board has been working diligently over the last few weeks to look for a new superintendent. As you know, Dr. Centennial has determined that it is time to retire, so they're looking vigilantly for someone to replace him, if that's possible, Dr. Centennial. So thank you to the board for their efforts. They have represented you well. I think they're all here tonight. This is not a board meeting, however. I need to advise you that they're here as participants, community members tonight. No action will be taken. No discussion related to the candidates will occur between the board members. And if you come to them and say, what do you think? They're going to say, I think the board's going to make a consideration at a later date and maybe choose one of these folks. They have to be non-committal in this type of environment. If we haven't met, my name is Steve Highland, and I represent Arizona School Board Association. Now, Arizona School Board Association is a nonprofit group. We are not associated with the state of Arizona, and we are not associated with the state board. We are separate from that group. The Arizona School Board Association does a number of things for districts around the state. We serve most of the 240 plus districts and some private groups also. We do legislative work, we do legal work, and we also look at searches, and we do policy work for districts. So that's who we are. The other thing I want to mention to you is we have no role in making any decision. The board hired ASBA to simply coordinate this effort, to advertise and bring candidates forward, but the board makes all the decisions. So I think that's an important caveat for you to have. We're going to take about an hour. We're going to let the candidates introduce themselves one at a time. They'll take 2 or 3 minutes each, give you a little background of who they are, where they've been, maybe why they're here. Then we have the questions that you've turned in. We're going to ask every candidate to be brief. Some of these questions, I've looked at a couple, and as always, you could write a book on some of these things. So we're going to ask them to spend 2, maybe 3 minutes at max. Each will answer each of the questions. We'll rotate the questions, so each has a chance to be first. Generally, we don't get through all the questions in a setting like this because there are just too many. But the important thing to remember is all questions turned in will be forwarded to the board, even if they're not read tonight. They'll be forwarded to the board because the board needs to see what's on your mind. Also, it is suggested by ASBA that these questions go to the new superintendent because the new superintendent equally needs to know what's on the community's mind. With that, it's time to meet the candidates. So, we'll just start at this end. Take 2 to 3 minutes, please. Introduce yourself so the group knows who you are.
Great. Hello, everyone. My name is Darwin Stifler. I am super excited to be here and more nervous than I thought I was going to be as I look out at you. I'm currently superintendent for Yuma Elementary School District 1 in Yuma, and I'm retiring from that position at the end of this year. I grew up here in the Phoenix area. My wife and I are looking for that next great adventure in our professional careers and what comes next. And I'm hoping it might be here. And so I'll leave time for everyone else at that. Heather?
Good evening, my name is Heather Cruz. I currently serve as the Deputy Superintendent here in the Peoria School District. And I come to you really from the Valley. I have been here longer than anywhere else. I did grow up in Ohio, but I've been here longer than I was in Ohio. And I came prior from the Litchfield School District. And I have a myriad of experiences ranging from pre-K through 12. Started my teaching career in the high school and spent most of my time in the middle school teaching science, have some experience in the arts as well, and am very happy to be here tonight and spend some time with you tonight. Thank you.
my name is Warren Schillingbird. I just moved to the Phoenix area in July, and I got a position with the Arizona State Department of Education. I'm an educational specialist in their Highly Effective Teachers and Leaders Division. My main responsibilities are to work with the state on developing their new model for principal and teacher evaluations. And I'm also working with a group of online providers to help facilitate their needs. Just briefly, I have a bachelor's degree in elementary special education. I have a master's degree in gifted education, and I have a PhD in educational psychology from Purdue University. I've taught, my first teaching position was high school special education. I have taught elementary, middle school, gifted. I have worked with graduate students through doctoral level students with dissertations. I taught for 8 years in Evanston. I worked at Northwestern University with their Midwest Talent Search program. I've been a elementary principal for 9 years. I was an assistant superintendent for curriculum instruction in Hinsdale, Illinois. And then I was a superintendent for 6 years in LaGrange, Illinois. My wife is a professor. I also was a professor for 12 years in Las Vegas, where my wife is also a professor, and she has been doing this online for the last 12 years, almost 13. We have a 13-year-old son, and we lived in Vegas for the 5 years, and then we moved when she got pregnant because we didn't want to raise our son in Las Vegas. So we moved back to Chicago. But she's been traveling back and forth. It started out a couple times a month, and then it went to once a week. And after 12 years, I thought it's time for her to not have a long flight. And so we moved here so she can have a 45-minute flight. And I was very fortunate to get the position I had. I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you. We're going to start with our questions. I'm going to combine the first two because they're very much alike. By the way, the pink cards, if you hadn't noticed, are from community members. The blue cards are district staff. So I'm going to make sure there's a fair mix of both. First question. Our district has a very robust CTE program history. What is your plan to continue, reduce, or expand these opportunities for students? I'm going to combine that with the next card, which is on JTEDS also. What is your position on JTED satellite funding and supplanting of supplies, equipment, funds towards salaries? So first off, our district has a very robust CTE program in history. What are your thoughts about that? And secondly, what are your thoughts in regards to the district supplanting funding for those JTEDs?
Actually, I think that JTEDs are one of the best ideas that have come out of Arizona in many years. So somebody's critical of that. One of the exciting things in Arizona, and I think what we will see more and more, let me back up. All of those pieces that are in place, we need to keep in place, and we need to, it looks like mostly we need to be fighting with the legislature to make sure that we have the funding to make sure that we can continue the great things that are happening. So it's a little bit sad that it's a win when we're going to get something like 7/8 of the current funding instead of 8/8 of the funding on how we do that. So it's again a recipe for doing more with less. Just on a practical matter to kind of answer that way. We need to look for more kinds of opportunities for kids to fit and where they're going to do, and to have as many different tracks as possible for kids to do. CTE, JTEDs are one avenue to do that. Pure college prep is an avenue to do that. And there are some other kinds of avenues available to kids as well, whether those be Grand Canyon diplomas and all of those other sorts of pieces. We need to have as many options for our kids as we possibly can. And I fully support CTE. And if there was a part in there I missed about that CTE is expensive, yes it is, and it's worth it.
I would concur with that. CTE has been a part of the Peoria fabric for many, many years. I would also say that it is a part of the huge success of the Peoria Unified School District. I think it also contributes to the graduation rate. And we need to expand those offerings to our students. I would also say, and I would agree and concur with Dr. Stifler, that we need to expand that funding, and we need to fight for that expansion of funding, so we don't even need to worry about the planning of funds for salaries. That doesn't need to enter into the conversation. So we need to ensure that there's enough funding, not only for CTE salaries, but for all the salaries that we need. So that's not just a CTE conversation, that's a conversation about broad-based funding, not just CTE funding. But we need to make sure there's enough funding for all the CTE funding that we need to take care of. And then we need to make sure that we have all of those in place. There's new pathways coming out, there's new new expansions of those. There's new pathways coming out. The new diploma that's coming out, I think, holds great promise for our students. I think we need to take a look at that for our students. And I think it just holds great promise for all of our students. And it has also done great things for our students with all of the industry certifications. For our students show great promise after they leave us, and we have that data to show that. So we need to continue that. We need to make sure that we have that robust programming in place and continue that.
All right, I see it's really hard being last because everybody says some good things. I think what I would add to that is one of the things I was really impressed with this district was your CTE programming. You have a lot of stuff online that I was able to see, and it was very impressive. I think that what we have to realize as educators is that even when students choose to go to college, a lot of them change their major by their sophomore year. Adolescents are still exploring and trying to figure out what they want to do and where they want to go. So the more opportunities and chances we give them to explore different avenues, try new approaches, new career choices and options, I think the better. And I think that having, again, the college career path, but a lot of different options for the CTE is really important. And I think that is what makes a really successful school system, is having all those options, because not everyone is going to be a college graduate. Not everyone needs to be a college graduate, but you need to provide the programming that they can leave high school with good options. And I think CTE is one of those ways to do that.
Second question from a community member. What are your feelings on charter schools and their effect on public schools? Ms. Cruz, Dr. Cruz, this will be your question first.
Well, I can tell you that it has not been a very positive effect on public schools. I will tell you that I am not afraid of competition from charter schools, as long as we're all playing with a leveled playing field and all playing by the same rules. However, that doesn't seem to be the case with charter schools. We're not funded the same way. We don't all play by the same business and procurement rules. So as long as we're all playing by the same rules, I'm all for that. So I really think that we need to look at those rules. We need to make sure that we're all on the same page with that. I just think that as long as they are held to the same accountability pieces, as long as they are held to the same enrollment pieces and rules along those lines, I am fine with that, but I can tell you that that is not the case. So we need to make sure that we need to hold them accountable in the same fashion as public schools. It has not been the case along those lines at all.
Anything? Well, I have a different kind of perspective of charter schools because I come from Illinois, where in the suburban area where there really weren't any charter schools. The only charter schools it was in the Chicago public schools. Our districts were considered so good that charters really couldn't compete with us. When I moved here, I was kind of fascinated, though, by all the programming that was offered and the gifted services that some schools don't want to do. And so I like that. I thought that was really positive. I agree with Dr. Cruz that the funding issue is a problem, but I guess the advantage of being in the state is I know we're not going to change that. We have very little control over it, and I would choose to say I'm not going to fight a battle I don't think I have a chance to win, but I'm happy to compete against whoever wants to offer whatever they want to offer that I think we can do better. Just as in Illinois, like I said, our schools are so good the charters couldn't compete. I think we just have to make ourselves so good that the charters can't compete.
Charters were envisioned, Arizona is king of choice and has been. 20 years ago, more than 20 years now, when charters were first envisioned, they were envisioned for a way to help raise all boats. They were envisioned in the popular culture when we have movies that we can go to the theater and see. They're about, here's a chance to save a child by going to a charter. What seems to me what's happening is that we build a charter next to a school that already has an A, and we build it right across the street. That doesn't sound like the story that was out in front of the whole charter movement. My experience is that charters recruit very hard the first part of the year, and something happens on the 101st day of school. You might not fit here, honey. Of course, this is right before high stakes testing, and of course this is against the law. But in my experience, this happens. Honey, you might not fit here. Perhaps you need to go back to traditional school. I wish that wasn't true, but I think that is true. I want parents to have choices. I want kids to fit. The system is uneven. It is frustrating, and it doesn't match the rhetoric at this point. But I'm a big believer in what is. That is the playing field in Arizona. Welcome to Arizona. That's how it is, right? As I got to interview with the Peoria Governing Board, there's a charter school being built, a block away from the district office, right next to the sign that says an A for Peoria. Irony abounds. Irony abounds. My goodness, I lost the question in there. What about charters? We're all getting better. Charters aren't demonstratively better than other schools in the state. They wash out more. People who are concerned about putting money into administration, well, the reason you don't see any of that in charters, because they don't report any of those things, as Dr. Cruz said. So all of those pieces and how that works. I don't really understand the legislature's, and I'm being more direct here than I thought I was going to be, but I don't understand the legislature putting all this emphasis on this, as charters are completely funded out of the general fund, as we keep decreasing the general fund and looking to do that. So all of those issues with charter, I guess I'd have to say, Steve, I'm not a big fan as they are currently being implemented in Arizona. But I was here 20 years ago, and I didn't think it was a bad idea then. I don't think open enrollment is a bad idea. I think some people aren't trying to just educate kids and do the best by kids. Some people are trying to make money, and I guarantee that the people on this stage, that's not what they're trying to do.
Thank you. Dr. Schillingberg, you'll begin this round. The question is, what is your plan to address the teacher shortage as far as recruiting and retaining loyal staff?
Well, I think that's a problem throughout the state, and it's certainly a problem that the State Department talks about a lot. I think that you have to really work with the legislature as much as you can to get the funding to increase salaries. That's, I think something you're never going to stop trying. I'm not sure how successful you'll be, but you'll still keep trying. Finding other ways to provide stipends to teachers, I think is important too, whether it's through your title funds or foundation support. They're, just being creative, thinking out of the box. I think that the one thing we can do is to make sure that the environment that teachers work in is a great place to work. Because I may not be happy that I'm not making the salary I wish I'd make, but if I'm happy going to work every day, that means a lot. And I can give up some things if I feel respected and valued and a part of the process. And I think it's really important that superintendent makes teachers feel included and valued, and make sure that they work with the building principals to create an environment that you just don't want to leave.
Come from a place that after you've gone for recruiting teachers, we get to recruit from what's left. So not quite joking, when I was asked this question in one of the interview panels, what I said was, what we try and do is we try and marry people off. Okay, and so hey, welcome to town, you're gonna be great, let me introduce you to some other people, and we find out when people get it, and it's not, and I'm not really even joking here, as people feel comfortable, as they feel embedded in the community, they stay. The whole piece about salaries, we're working hard on that. You're working extremely hard on that. You have some competitive salaries, and they're not enough. I think what we all need to do, and the people out there need to do this, we need to be lifting up, at every opportunity possible, we need to be lifting up how great and fortunate we are to have these teachers who are willing to dedicate their lives to raise our children, to help raise our children, and principals as well. We need to celebrate people more and more. About the same time as charter schools started going, is about the same time we started bashing teachers across this country. It's going to take a while to turn that back around. This isn't just a Peoria issue. It's not just an Arizona issue. It's an issue across the country. Are there some things we can do? There's some things we can do on the margin. We can work on developing and growing our own. And so out of our paraprofessional ranks, we can seek grant funding to get folks and to help those people who already know us and love our kids, to help them get their degrees so that they can be qualified teachers. We can do that. We can look really hard. One thing I personally do is I go back like from where Warren's from and I look for teachers there. There's more teachers than they need, or that used to be the case. That's not even the case anymore. Upstate New York, Ohio, those areas. We don't produce enough teachers in Arizona to fill all the positions. We don't. We don't produce enough principals, we don't produce enough psychologists, we don't produce enough therapists, we don't produce enough any of those. They're gonna have to come from out of state, is the only way, the practical way that we're gonna be able to do that.
Thank you.
So I certainly would concur with my colleagues on the stage, but I would certainly start with our loyal employees that have been here forever and ever. And certainly we need to work on compensation first. That's been the #1 priority of our governing board and our current superintendent moving forward. And we need to look at not only our current employees, but moving that salary schedule and moving it up, as well as looking at time for our current employees to work during the day, and work on embedded time in the salary and during the day, as well as resources to do the things that you need to do and be successful in the classroom with your students. So I would say those 3 things moving forward, as well as we certainly do need to recruit highly effective staff. And I would say not just with our teaching ranks, our classified also has some serious turnover. We need to look at our classified as well, and certainly look at professional development. And I would look at our administrators as well. We need professional development across all of our employee groups to make sure that we have that highly effective leader so that they can support our teachers and our classified staff in those buildings, because we know that if we don't have those highly effective leaders in those buildings, teachers don't stay, they leave. So we need to make sure that we have those highly effective leaders in those buildings as well.
Thank you. Okay, we're back to
Okay?
as a first person to respond. Thank you. This is from a parent. How do you connect and know each group of people in the district to grow systems as a whole? The second part of the question is, what are your plans to address teacher shortage, but you just did that. So the first part again is, how do you make connections with all groups of people in the district?
Well, I think the superintendent, I think everyone in the district, but I think the superintendent is uniquely positioned to be out in the community, to know the groups of people, to be involved, whether that's in church gatherings, whether that's Rotary, whether that's Kiwanis. If somebody's needed to sit in the dunk tank at the high school carnival, that ought to be the superintendent. All of those sorts of things you need to be out there and at the table with. I was excited at the interviews today to see the police chief from Peoria and a police commander from Glendale. Well, you need to know those folks before there's a problem. You need to have a relationship with those. You need to know the folks, I would imagine, around here at Thunderbird, at ASU, and all of that, the neighboring school systems. The superintendent needs to be everywhere, everywhere. I've been working on Omnipresent for about 8 years now, so.
I think one of the key characteristics of the Peoria Unified School District are relationships. That's something that they've been known for years and years and years, and something that needs to continue. Dr. Santarelli has done a fantastic job of that, and something that would continue with myself in that position as superintendent, and going out into the community and reaching out to people, and knowing that you have that open door, and knowing that you can go out and reach out to as many of those groups as possible, and knowing that you have that open door anytime.
I think that developing relationships is one of the most important things that a leader does, and getting out in the community for people to know you and to feel comfortable with you is really important, because if you're really going to get honest feedback, people have to trust you and feel safe, and I think that's a really important thing to develop. I believe in being involved in the groups and participating as much as you can. But one thing I did that I thought was very helpful is I have what I called leadership councils, where I had a teacher leadership council where I had a teacher rep from every building that we met monthly. And they set the agenda, I had agenda items, we talked about what was going on in the district, I got their feedback, because sometimes, especially a larger district, you can kind of lose that touch. I did the same thing with parents. I had a parent leadership council. They met once a month as well. We shared things the district was looking at, got their input. That was very positive. And I also did the same thing with students. It was one of my favorite things each month was to meet with the students and hear what their concerns were, what they liked, what they didn't, what they thought we should be working on. So I think anytime you can bring people together and make them feel a part of the process, that's really important. And again, being a visible presence is really vital to being successful in this position.
Thank you. Dr. Cruz, you're first this time. Question is, how do you plan to address overcrowding in Northern District schools and dwindling population in the central part of the district?
That is an excellent question. We have been working on that, and we have had several committees working on that. In fact, committees of parents working on that with a plan. We made some very, very difficult decisions at our last governing board meeting. In fact, the governing board made some pretty landmark decisions, I would say, at the last governing board meeting to not renew some open enrollments. I think that's the first time in a very, very long time that that's happened in this district. And that's not something that happens typically. So next step would be to look at some perhaps boundary shifts to look at that. I know there's a Citizens Advisory Committee studying perhaps going out for a bond election to perhaps build some new schools in the northern end. And there's also some work that will happen in the fall to look at some boundary adjustments in the southern and central end. So there's some plans to look at those adjustments, to look at some different configurations of some schools to better utilize some of those southern end schools as well. So there's plans to look at those and some different configurations of those schools.
Well, that's a really hard question. And I want to say that as a leader, the last thing I would do is come in and make decisions without talking to people. So I can't say I have solutions that I would do, because I think it's very important you involve everybody in this process. It sounds like you are, which is wonderful. Boundary changes, all those issues are very tough for people to deal with. Neighborhood schools are really important to people, and I understand that. The one option I think you can look at that could possibly help is the idea of magnet schools. If you have schools with lower enrollment, if you create some kind of magnet program there to draw other students from other schools there, that could help reduce the population in some places and move it to another. I think that's been very successful, especially if you choose the right type of magnet program.
Peoria Unified is famous in the state for having multiple excellent programs for kids to choose from. It's famous, Denton's famous for working with community. All of you are famous for doing that. That's come to my attention many times over the years. That has to continue. And yet we still have to live within our means. And I wish that wasn't so, and the means are meager in Arizona, and so sometimes we have to make difficult decisions. I had to close a school. It felt like a death. Actually, I've been a part of closing 2 schools. I'm not saying that that's what needs to happen, but I mean, at some point we have to live within our means, and we have to figure out how to do that. That's not a superintendent decision. That's a community decision that the superintendent helps to facilitate. Any of those things, whether it be boundary changes or all of those sorts of things. Of course, this is all compounded by Arizona's open enrollment laws and charters, and current year funding is going to change it yet one more time. What's going to be happening next year? Likely. Legislature could still change that. What's the plan? The plan is whatever we determine, if I'm your superintendent, and I'm sure if either of they were as well, whatever we determine needs to be done, that we honestly look at the facts of the situation, we study it, we're transparent, we include as many people as we possibly can, and we make the very best decision possible. even if it's uncomfortable sometimes. And that's what I would say.
Next question. Dr. Schillenberg, you're up first on this one. This is another take on CTE. The first questions related to CTE had to do with supportive programs. This is a little bit different, a little different slant. What is your philosophy on career and technical education and the success of high school students at graduation?
Well, I'm not sure I understand that question. I think that, you know, a student's success at graduation is that they graduate with the skills and ability to make decisions leading to the future. And whether that's from college, prep, or CTE, I think a lot of it is giving them the tools to become an adult and take that next step. And again, it's when you're an adolescent, you really don't know exactly what you want to do. Most don't. I mean, a few got it down, but most don't. So I think the important thing is that you make sure that students graduate with the confidence and the skills necessary to work in a very changing workforce. And you know, it means they have the ability to solve problems and to be good people and have the soft skills of being kind and respectful and the academic knowledge they need. And if it's a certain career aspiration, they have the basic skills to work toward that. I think what is going to make one child successful is going to be very different for every child. I mean, there's not one thing you can say they're going to have. So I would say, again, that they graduate feeling confident and prepared to take that next step and are excited about that next step.
If the question means, what does the research say? I don't have access to the PUSD data, but I know what your graduation rate is. And I'm going to bet that's you do the CTE well, you have a vaunted graduation rate. But what does the literature say? What did even the Arizona legislature hear? It makes a difference. It makes a difference. More kids are going to be successful. More kids are going to graduate. Kids are going to be happier. They're going to be more successful adults. We're going to be accomplishing our mission if we do CTE right. I'm pretty confident to stand on that research.
I believe if you take 2 or more CTE courses, you're more successful after graduation. And I believe the strength of our CTE program is, and I believe our model is so strong because you can take calculus one period, you can take culinary arts the next. I just love that for our kids, that they can have that experience. You can't get that everywhere. A lot of times you just have to take academics all day long, and you don't ever have the opportunity to experience other things during the day. And even whether it be the arts or other classes throughout the day, other electives, you don't ever have that experience. And we have such rich, robust offerings, and I know this is a CTE question, but you don't ever have that experience. Our really great opportunity is that those classes are right on that campus. They can take them, they're right next door. So I think that adds to the programming, and I think that adds to our success rate with CTE and with graduation and post-secondary readiness. They're more ready to take those on-ready courses in post-secondary work.
Thank you. We're back to the beginning.
Okay.
Question is, what professional organizations do you belong to, and what leadership role have you taken with these organizations?
Well, I'm a member of ASA and ASCD. I don't have leadership positions in that. And within Yuma County, I've led multiple years. I've led the Superintendent Association there, so bring the superintendents together to do that. What else? Would you read the question one more time, please?
The question is, what professional organizations do you belong to, and what leadership role have you taken in these organizations?
I'm also involved in community organizations. So I'm a member of Rotary, and so all the things that you can imagine that a Rotary Club would do, whether that be cooking sausage at the fair or building playground equipment or just opening up your checkbook to pay the dues every month and get fined and smile about that. I am on the board of directors for Amberley's Place. Amberley's Place is a nonprofit which is about victims' rights. It's a family advocacy center. And so I'm very proud of the work we do there. So I'll stop there.
I've been a member of the Southwest Valley YMCA board, helped them really get their doors open and started, and help them raise their money to get them open and started in the Southwest Valley. And I also serve as a member of Arizona School Administrators. I'm currently the president-elect of that statewide organization, and I will take the helm as president in June. I've also served as their president of the Educational Services Division twice.
I belong to a lot of national organizations, from National Gift Association to the Council for Exceptional Children to the American Theater Alliance to the Mind Brain Education Society. I like to belong to these groups to get the information to share. In my local community from Illinois, I was part of our foundation. I was part of I was on the board of Charlie's Gift, which was a organization that supported autism that one of our parents started. That was very impressive. I was a member of the Chamber of Commerce education program, which supported businesses interacting with the schools. But to be honest, I really haven't taken leadership roles in those organizations because I'm just too busy. To me, my time and energy, I had to focus in the schools, and that's where I like to be. So I enjoyed being a part of the organization and getting the information, but I wanted my time to be in the schools.
Next question, Dr. Cruz. What, excuse me, we did that one. Next one. Given the current political climate in Arizona, what has prepared you to be the leading superintendent in the state? How will you work for the benefit of PUSD students, teachers, community? How will you advocate for funding? Big question.
Well, I do think it has helped being a part of Arizona School Administrators. I think that having those relationships already at the statewide level has helped to forge those relationships with statewide leaders and work down at the legislature already. Building relationships with our local legislators has also helped that, and with our city leaders as well. Work with our local legislators as well. Certainly staying abreast and work with our locals, especially ASBA, and getting that information in a timely manner, and having that internal network and learning how to find that information and tapping that network when necessary, and learning who to call when for what, and learning where to go for that information, and who to call when is important to know at the right time, and how to advocate at the right time is also important. So I think all of that will serve us well at any given time. So I think that has prepared me well.
Well, I think it's very important for the superintendent to be a leader when it comes to fighting for the laws and regulations that you need to do your jobs, and that shouldn't be the issue that teachers have to worry about. I think that's something the superintendent needs to really spend a lot of energy, time, and advocate for. But I think that what I would say is I have gotten some great experience working for the Department of Education, some great insights, and my experience working with I work with a group of about 12 school districts who are online providers, and it was interesting listening to them struggle with some of the issues they had that they didn't know how to solve. And I share with them, do you realize you are a big group of school districts here? And I can tell you, it's Tucson and Scottsdale and Paradise Valley and Mesa and Gilbert. I mean, they were just together, they could have a much louder voice than what you can have individually. So I think one of the important things that I would do as a leader is make those connections so that we can work together and be one voice to make these changes. Because people aren't going to listen to one person, no matter how big your school is, but they might listen to 10 or 20 of you. And I think that's what you need to do. You have to really find a way to bring people together who are in leadership positions to make sure people listen and hear what you have to say.
I'm looking for leverage. I've had the experience to call my legislator and to have them dutifully return my call after the vote. That wasn't an accident. You know, I understood the strong arming that was happening to him before the case and that. I've personally testified at the legislature and watched how people from school districts aren't always treated with dignity and respect. I have recently learned these people who don't want to hear about how schools should be run from people who run schools, who do they listen to? So increasingly I've been spending time with the people who they do listen to. And I think that that's a strategy that makes sense. I believe that a time is coming in Arizona, and you're starting to see what we sometimes call alphabet groups and that sort of stuff, but business people and that who are fed up, who are going to stop letting the legislature do really silly things. Not really silly things, wrong things. And those folks need to be in relationship. It's really an important word. They need to be in relationship and have good data on what's happening in schools, and they need specific data. And sometimes we need to sign up and we need to sue the state. And I didn't really used to think that was a good idea, but I think that's not a bad idea anymore because it forces issues that should be forced. And in this chair here, there's an opportunity to do that on a grander scale. There's an opportunity to not have to knock quite as hard on the door to be heard, is what I perceive to have happened. There's some natural allies in the area to work with where it's kind of lonely where I am right now. That there are few. I currently, in my school district, there's an Army base and there's a Marine Corps Air Station, and they all agree, but they are not allowed to advocate for those sorts of things. That is the big business where I am, right? We're farmers of those sorts of things. So we need to rely on the community. We need to be in relation, that other question that we had before, relationship with the people in the community. I think this is a lot of what the superintendent needs to do. The superintendent doesn't need to teach class and doesn't need to be principaling schools. Excuse me, we have teachers and we have principals. They need to do those jobs. The superintendent needs to be working with the school board and working with the community to make the whole system better on whatever lever is available. And there's a lot of them. And you have to be brave and you have to be bold and you have to do that. And then lots of times it doesn't work. And you got to do it again anyway, again and again and again.
Thank you. Next question, our Schillingberg. What is your view of the role of fine arts in public education?
I love that question. This is something I don't usually share these kind of things, but I actually moved to Chicago on a dance scholarship. And I was a professional dancer for several years with Giordano's Jazz Dance Chicago. I like to say that was 30 years and 30 pounds ago. Couldn't do it now, but I am passionate about the arts. Music art teachers love me. I don't think you have a great school system without a strong arts program. And not only do I experience that personally and understand that from that viewpoint, I have seen what a difference it makes for children and kids. You know, when you have some children that can show their talents academically, other children can show their talents musically. Others can show it artistically and some physically. I think you have to have all those opportunities for students to build that confidence so when they leave your school system, they are ready to be successful adults. And the arts, I think, is a great way to provide that well-rounded child who appreciates the world and other cultures, and I think it just makes you happy.
I can't claim that I was a dancer. But yes. I lead a school system now where the budget has gone backwards every year for 2 years it stayed the same, but every other year it's gone backwards. And we don't have an override. And every one of our students has art, music, and PE every week by a certified teacher of art, music, and PE. It's critical. It's what we need to do. Kids are supposed to like school. People are supposed to be excited. People want to come and support and do those things. It is glorious and appropriate and something worth fighting for.
So I too am a huge advocate for the arts. I will share also that both my bachelor's and my master's is also in the arts. And so I will tell you that as passionate as we are about CTE, we are also about arts. So it is absolutely critical for students and their development of creativity and their open-mindedness and their uniqueness. It is absolutely critical for students to have this K through 12 and to have that choice in their programming in the high school as well for them to experience that and to have that available in the elementary school for our students to develop. So I hope you also were able to come to our arts festival, because that will sell you on any arts programming available. When you saw all of that art out there developed by students, amazing, amazing, and critical to students' development, critical.
Thank you. Dr. Stifler, you're first. You've had an opportunity to look at Arizona Revised Statutes Title 15 and how much they cost our schools. The question is, would you consider a community committee to look at reducing this regulatory burden? In other words, reduction in Title 15.
Well, one thing I laud the State Department of Education for doing this year was taking some of those very kinds of ideas to the legislature, and that actually, they've been receptive to that. Kind of amusing, but absolutely true. I was, part of my role is to go to political gatherings and people who are thinking about running for the legislature, and one person once, it was the wrong time, but they asked me, well, what can I do for you if I get elected? And I said, don't pass any more laws, just stop. Just stop. If you get there, don't propose one. Stop. It's crazy, right? So as I work with, well, you know, I Chamber of Commerce, well, Darwin, why do you do this? Well, so, you know, we have, all of us, I'm sure, have the electronic, but I like the thick one and a number 4 font of all the Arizona, you know, Title 15. It has some 32 in there as well. Then there's the No Child Left Behind stuff, and then you put that up with the board policy, which is about this, and the Chamber of Commerce guy goes, oh. You know, as the Chamber of Commerce starts to say, well, all of the things that a new business has to deal with, it's absolutely true, but it's not more than a school, because we get to do all of that and. All of that and. Can the community propose more? What you need to do, if you're friends with a legislator, get them. There isn't one that I think is sacred. Kill any of them and we'll start fresh. Go for it. It'd be a grand thing.
I concur. I'm totally in.
Yeah, I think it's important that, you know, we do work to make sure that we have the legislation that supports education. We get rid of the laws that are not supporting it, the funding, the academics, all those things. It's a challenging environment, but I think you just have to keep up on all of it and be involved and make sure your voices are heard.
Next question. What is your position on standard-based grading for proficiency or mastery? Dr. Cruz.
This is a very interesting question because it really depends on grade level and teacher. Because I could ask 10 teachers what they thought of this and I would get 10 different answers. So I think implemented well, I think done well, I think it's very, very important, then I could support that. Now, implemented across a very large school district, you have to be very, very careful how you do that. I think you have to only implement something across a district this large that a system like this is ready to do. So that would not be a decision that would be mine, that would be a decision that would be the teachers and the governing boards. So you would have to really, really work long and hard to make sure that a system like this is ready to do that. And parents would have to weigh in on that, and even students to that end. You have high school students even looking at that with standards-based grading. So that would not really be a decision such as mine. Now, could I support it? Absolutely, I could support it. Do I support standards-based grading? I absolutely could support that. But I think you have to make sure that the system supports it, and not just me. There's a whole lot of other people that have to weigh in on that, including parents, including students, teachers, broad-based, and our governing board. And then you'd have to look at what kind of supports are in place to make sure that there's a successful implementation of that across the system to make sure that that's set up for success over time. So that would be my caveat to that. But could I support that? Absolutely, if we had broad-based support for that across our system.
Yeah, I think a lot of places are moving to standards-based grading and reporting with the standards requirement and just tying the grade to the standards. I don't think that's such an issue. I think having proficiency-based and mastery-based is a little more challenging because we are so pushed by tests in today's world. We forget that developmentally children come about learning things at different times, and that's normal. And unfortunately, we're pushing the idea that everyone has to read at first grade when our research tells us that a child learns to read between the ages of 5 and 8. Well, 8's third grade. And if I'm just doing mastery and I keep that child back because they haven't mastered certain skills yet, that really can affect their self-esteem and their confidence, and there's some really terrible things that can happen along that. So, I think, again, standards is not a big issue, but I think you have to be very cautious. Mastery learning, we did years ago, and people could not keep up with it. It failed, and I wouldn't want to go back to something like that.
I guarantee you that I wouldn't take anything regarding grading to the governing board unless teachers wanted it to go. I think that, I know that K-8 is a little bit different than high school because of the credit issue, but ultimately grades, sometimes we get lost in this. They're about communicating student progress with the family. And whether that's 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, and 5s, A, B, C's, D's, and F's, whether that's a mastery grade or whatever, it's about did the child do that? And however that works best between the teacher and the parent is how that ought to be done at those grade levels. Now, a time is coming where we're going to have some different pathways for kids to move faster. And the grading system is one thing that is an impediment to when that's going to happen someday. It is hard to manage. It has blown up before. It probably not here, wouldn't let that happen, but it's going to blow up other places before. It's like a lovely thing to track and watch on the internet as people get all fired up about it. Right after Common Core math problems, I think there's about standard-based grading on the internet and Facebook. So all of those things are there. As Warren said, kids grow, they learn at different rates. They're people, they're not widgets, it's not a factory. What we need to do is communicate with families to help to do whatever we can to accelerate that rate, to accurately communicate that so that it's supportive. As soon as, it's the same thing when we start to decide, well, how many reporting periods are we going to have in the year? And are we going to have trimesters? Well, then are we going to have progress reports? And then for teachers, the progress reports feel just like another report card is how that feels and how that's going to go. So now we have 6 grading periods, or we have 8 grading periods, or all of those things. Ultimately, it's about what is the best way for the parent to know how their child is doing and for the teacher to communicate that. And I think that really works best as conversations. And grades are kind of like data to support those conversations, but they don't take the place of the conversation that teachers ought to be having, or parents ought. The teachers all want to have those conversations. I don't want to put that on teachers. That parents ought to be having with the teachers. And the grades are just a way to keep track after the fact.
Dr. Schellenberg. Question is, what do you see as the most critical need for Peoria School District, and what could you do to fulfill and nurture that critical need?
Well, I think as I shared before, I think it's dangerous for someone who's coming in new to tell you what your critical need is and what I'm going to do to fix it. I wouldn't presume to know the critical need. I think that is something that you will learn after you've went out to the community, went out to the schools, met the teachers, the parents, the business, all the people you need to get to know and really see where the system is. Now, I could tell you, just because I have a little insight, because I work at the state and they have a lot of inside information on what some needs are, but I don't think I'd even take that, to be honest with you, because that's a perspective and it may or may not be what the real critical need is. But I think, again, it's very dangerous for me, being someone new, to come in and say, this is your problem and I'm going to fix it this way. It would totally flop.
PUSD is great. It's great. The conditions that were in place as it rose to great are going to change. They're going to change. I don't know what they're all going to be. Some of your neighborhoods, some of our neighborhoods, I hope it's me, but some of our neighborhoods are going to age out. What are we going to do about that? Expectations of parents about how we're going to be impacted by charters, about what's the role of technology in schools down the road. All of those things are going to change. And so what I think the really hardest thing that's going to face, because I know there are great people here, but among the most difficult things to do is, how do you change when you're winning? And you're winning now. So as you know, the world's going to change, and it's changing fast. The most natural thing is to stay and do what you've always done because you've watched it work. This is a bold thing for me to say, but this is what I would bring to you. I don't have an answer for what to do with those, but I am absolutely committed to, with whoever I'm working with, to dealing with those things head on as a community to decide what to do with these new realities that we're going to be presented with, whether that's growth, whether that's technology, whether that's whatever the legislature dreams up in the remaining part of the session. All of those sorts of pieces, or teacher shortages, and all of those things that we are committed to finding. We're going to have to find new ways to face new realities.
I would have to say that funding has to be at the top of my list. And I know funding seems like an easy answer, but there's funding in many categories. So capital funding is reaching a critical need. And it's a critical need not just for Peoria Unified. And this district has done an absolutely phenomenal job of keeping things running. And 2000 bond has gotten people really through some critical times, but we are reaching a critical stage with capital funding, resources, our buildings, et cetera. The need for new buildings, that question already came up in the north end, et cetera. So I would say capital funding, the need for consistent funding on the M&O side, absolutely critical. That needs to be advocated for on a consistent basis so that compensation can become a reality, and that needs to be just a constant basis so that can be a dependency and that can just become a reality, and we can just continue to raise that salary schedule time and time again. So I would say funding, time and time again. We can continue to bring those resources back to teachers, and that we can continue to fund those time and time again. So I would say funding is that number one need. There are other needs, certainly, but I would agree with Darwin. PUSD has done so many things great over time, but funding is reaching a critical point, especially on the capital side. We are going to have to start doing things a little bit differently.
Thank you. Well, we've run our course of time. I'm going to ask one more question, but before I do that, I'd like to again thank you for being here, and I'd like to thank you for being here on the behalf of the governing board, and I'd like to thank the governing board. They've been very diligent in their effort. Also, before you leave tonight, you have an opportunity to mingle out in the lunch area with these candidates, shake hands, get to meet them, introduce yourself. Please take the time to do that. And before you leave, at that front table, there's a little card in there that's called a response card or a comment card. Please communicate with the board what your thoughts are regarding this position and the folks you've heard tonight and the things that you've heard them say. There are the cards out there and there's a basket out there at the table. Please put your comments in those baskets, in that basket. One last question. We'll just start. This is a 30-second question.
Okay?
Why Peoria?
There is so much right here. I'm excited about what the next step, when you're already on the top, what's the next step look like? I am excited. I'd like to be a part of that. That's pretty close to 30 seconds.
I believe my values and my skill set match Peoria to a T. My work ethic and my values are a perfect match for Peoria. So I look forward to bringing that to the next level here in Peoria and helping to take the district to that next level, serving as your superintendent.
I would say I've only applied to this position because I think this district is so impressive, and who wouldn't want to be a part of it? And I think that also for me, not only, everyone goes into education to make a difference and help. I think I have a background that really enables me to help in lots of areas, but as everyone needs to be challenged to enjoy what they do, this to me would be a very exciting challenge, because I want to be stimulated. I want everyone else I work with to be stimulated, and I think this would be a great place to do that. And I like the board's idea of excellence and being the best, because that's what I've always strived for, and I've had a lot of experience in places that have done that, and I would be excited to be here to do that as well.
Thank you, and thank you all. Again, please take a moment to meet and greet these folks in the lobby, and a big hand, thank you very much.
Thank you.